Hi, I'm Shane.
And I'm Alex.
And this is the RPM podcast.
And hello again, and thanks for joining us for our 10 days of season reviews from the 2021 Formula One World Championship. And this is episode 5 today. Going in reverse championship order, we'll be talking about AlphaTauri. Now let's jump straight into it then, with their 142 points and one podium. 7 retirements overall, so probably not too good in the grand scheme of things. But it wasn't a bad season by any means for AlphaTauri. They achieved their best points haul ever and equaled their best Constructors' Championship finish of 6th. But 2021 still felt a bit like an underachievement for them, considering the huge potential of their car. Often seemed like it might be the 3rd fastest out of everybody. Especially in the hands of Gasly, who had the 5th highest average qualifying position behind the Mercedes and Red Bull drivers. So he was really doing very, very well with it around a single lap. It was a very one-sided battle between the two teammates, really. I think as expected when one of them was a rookie. But not because Yuki lacked speed. He just couldn't keep it out of the walls or out of the gravel. There was lots of unenforced errors, some clumsy attempts at overtakes, which cost him some penalties and the like. Now, that's not to say the drivers are the only ones at fault for their missed opportunities. I think AlphaTauri themselves were pretty kind of strategy blind at times. They left Gasly out on full wets while the rest of the field were on inters at Imola. Several times they did Q1 runs on mediums for reasons I can't understand. Dawdled with the switch to inters in Russia. That really cost Gasly. I think they cost him during his qualifying time as well. And they went for a 2-stopper in Qatar after Gasly lined up P2 on the grid, and he ended up P11 as a result. I mean, it was an incredible opportunity for them with the pace in that car, and they just ended up with not even a single point to show for it. Sometimes it feels like they're still acting like a smaller team, going for these sort of risky, bold strategies when really they need to be more flexible and make smarter choices that trust in the pace of the car. So I kind of want to say good things about AlphaTauri because I really like them as a team. I think they have great looking cars. I think they're a great technical outfit. They're an exciting up and coming prospect that have long been in the shadow of their bigger brother Red Bull team, and they've always been plucky and always taken opportunities. But I still feel a bit disappointed by them in this season. It feels like a big what if season for them. What did you make of AlphaTauri's 2021, Shane?
Well, it's like you said, there's been glimpses of absolute brilliance, and then there's been races where they look like a rookie amateur team which have just come into the sport. And this is a team which has been around for a very long time, admittedly rebranded once or twice before, but this is Red Bull's sister team, and that's what people call it. But it's a shame because they've actually done better than last year. Let's just focus on that for a second. So in 2022, the team scored 107 points and finished 7th in the Constructors' Championship. It's a pretty underwhelming year for them. And then moving into this year, like you said, they scored 142 points and finished in 6th place in the Constructors' Championship, only narrowly missing out on 5th place by only a handful of points. I think it's 13 points they missed out by catching Alpine by 13 points, which is a massive shame because they've got 2 very interesting drivers, and this is where the team, I don't want to say they've struggled because the team have had a good year. They've had, like I said, glimpses of absolute brilliance, but they've also had some really rookie mistakes, and the majority of those have come from their rookie themselves, which is completely understandable. But personally, and I don't want to criticize Yuki too much, but I mentioned with the Haas team how the drivers have really developed themselves over the year. They've shown improvement from the first couple of the races where there was a lot of spins, there was a couple of accidents, all the way through to the last few races where they're keeping it on track. They're fighting each other relatively cleanly. Even Schumacher was keeping up with the Williams in Dubai up until Latifi put it in the wall. So there was progression. But I just feel like with Yuki at the moment, there hasn't been that much progression because, and we mentioned this, I think, in our last post-race review, Yuki's like bookend the season fantastically because in Bahrain, in preseason testing, he was fantastic. He was pretty fast. In Bahrain, he had a great result. And then in Dubai, Abu Dhabi, he had his best finish with 4th place. So either end of the season has been really encouraging for the new driver. It's just those 20 races in between where, unfortunately, and this sounds really critical, he has made some rookie mistakes, which we'll allow, but he has made some silly mistakes as well, like overtaking mistakes where he's put his car into positions where you don't think he's going to make it. And the situation never really goes his way. Like he goes for overtakes, which are always going to end up in contact. And that's been shown time and time again this year, which is a real shame because on one hand, you've got Pierre Gasly with 110 points, which is fantastic. I mean, that's more than half of what Alpine have scored. And then you've got Yuki with 32 points. And I just feel like if Yuki was a little bit more consistent and brought in a couple more points, we might be talking about Alpine now in 6th place instead of AlphaTauri. And I do feel like this team's got potential. I love the team like you. They, Monza, that like twice before with Sebastian Vettel and then Pierre Gasly last year. It's just magical. The car's got potential. And like you said, Gasly's qualifying position of an average of 5th place. That car, it's not just Gasly, it's the car as well. The car is fast. But it just needs both of them, unfortunately. And that's where I feel like the biggest setback is this year. And I'm really hoping next year things will change. But as for this year, I think the biggest setback is their newest driver and how he's developed over this year. And I don't know if he has developed much over this year because we've seen pretty consistent mistakes throughout the whole entire year.
Yeah, it's not so much that we demand that a rookie come in and suddenly be brilliant. It's more how he's been behind his teammate. There's a difference between lacking a bit of pace as a rookie and needing to adjust and making a few mistakes here and there and ultimately not stacking up in the same way. And you can look at a rookie season like that and say, all right, we can build on this. But with Tsunoda, it just felt like there's just one too many silly mistakes, one too many putting it in the wall. I've said it before and I'll say it again, he's a very lucky man to still have that seat for next year, knowing what we do about... And he thinks so as well. Yeah, he clearly agrees, knowing what we know about the nature of Red Bull's driver program. It's funny, really, because Ross Brawn called Tsunoda the best rookie in years after the Bahrain Grand Prix. I wonder if he still holds that opinion. So despite a couple of occasions where he did show genuine speed, he was replete with unforced errors and hitting the wall in Monaco, Imola, Baku, and at Paul Ricard. He hit Kubica in Italy. He hit Stroll in Brazil. He hit Vettel in Saudi Arabia. He's got to be the most accident-prone rookie in years might be more appropriate, I think. There are drivers that had killed to start their F1 careers in a car that competitive. So he really needs to turn it around next year in order to put back up the faith that's been put into him for that drive. He did finally obviously nab a P4 in the last race, like you said. Smattering of good points finishes across the season, but his 32 points to Gasly's 110 really left him look very wanting, rookie or no rookie. So it's all needs to be a little bit better and more Abu Dhabis and Bahrains and less the rest of the season, basically. Let's talk about Gasly now then. So I know Russell is known as Mr. Saturday, but I think Gasly has earned that title as well, really, with some fantastic hot laps across the season. He qualified in the top 6 16 times, whilst his teammate's best starting position all season was P7. So he really was on top of that car over a single lap, absolutely. And for the most part, he did convert a lot of those chances into good points. 9 top 6 finishes, especially in Baku, a great P4 start was followed by a lot of consistency to put him on the podium after all of the chaos ahead. And 2 solid P4s in the Netherlands and Mexico. But yeah, I found myself wanting a bit more from Gasly because they really felt like he was constantly just on the edge of what he was really capable of, rather than actually getting there. There was a couple of occasions where he threw it away all by himself. Really, right at the start of the season, he took a really good P5 at the beginning. He stacked up on the grid P5 and then hit Ricciardo. And that just kind of ruined his whole thing on lap 1, knocked his front wing off in the first lap. And then it was Ricciardo he hit again at turn 1 in Monza, where he did the same thing in the sprint race. And that knocked him from P6 to the back of the grid. So it kind of ruined his whole thing. So I feel like if he can keep his nose clean a little bit more, there's no telling what he might achieve. He feels like someone who's perfectly capable of sneaking that car onto the podium more than a few times in the season, but didn't quite happen this year, especially with Perez kind of struggling in places and Gasly out-qualifying him on quite a few occasions, it did feel like that was the opportunity for Gasly to maybe give Red Bull a little bit of an elbow, saying, I could have been in that car and now I'm doing this in the sister team. How impressed were you with Gasly this season? Were you kind of more impressed with him last season or this one?
It's hard to. Last year he had the Monza win, which was incredible. It was the highlight, one of the highlights of the season for me, just because it was Toro Rosso, AlphaTauri. History was repeating itself, and Gasly got the win. This year he's only been on the podium once, and that was Azerbaijan. And that, I feel like that race, and this is not taking anything away from his podium at all, but that race was very disrupted towards the end. You had Max Verstappen with his tyre blowout, and obviously caused, Lance Stroll had a safety car as well, and Lewis Hamilton went straight on at turn one. So there was a lot of factors at play in the last couple of laps, which meant Gasly got that podium position, which is fantastic, because actually to win, first you have to finish, don't you? You can't take anything away from the drivers if they manage to achieve a podium by being lucky, because they've created that luck themselves. They've made sure they're in the right place at the right time. But it never came again, did it? It never came again. There was no other podiums this year, which was a little bit, I don't know. I'm not disappointed at all, because he's in an AlphaTauri, and actually we've got Williams, Ferrari, we've got McLaren and Mercedes, who are all fighting pretty, for massive amounts of points and are finishing on the podiums a couple of times a year. Especially if you're, actually I didn't think Ferrari finished on the podium. Oh, they did a couple of times. But it just felt like there was more to come. It just felt like there was a little bit extra. He was giving 95%, and I wanted to see 105%. Like, there was that little bit extra I wanted to see. That sparkle which we saw in Monza last year just never really shone through. Maybe it's because it was just him. Maybe if he had a teammate which could play into the strategy more, he might be able to produce those those excellent results. All we have to do is look at Mercedes and Red Bull, and more importantly Max and Lewis, and how if they've got their teammate with them, that team does better than the other team. But if they don't have that teammate with them, it's just one car, it's a sitting duck. They can only run one strategy, and that's the one they've got to stick with. Gasly was always running his own strategy, it felt like, because there was Yuki Tsunoda was never there. He was never there to assist.
Especially in the battle against Alpine, it did feel a bit like Team Gasly versus Alpine at times. And it was very often the case that Gasly himself would get past both cars and ultimately was doing what he could to make that happen. By the end of the season, obviously it wasn't the case, as we'll talk about Alpine next. But yeah, they just need a little bit more consistency, and that's kind of true of the team overall. Speaking of which, obviously we go into next season. What do you expect out of them for the next year?
Let's talk about the car. I expect the car to be as strong as it is this year. Obviously, there's a different philosophy in aerodynamics. We're changing the cars, but they're keeping the same engines and the same power unit. So actually, they've got a great power unit inside it. We know that because the car is fast, and you can see that in qualifying and at some races. So I don't expect them to drop off the pace at all. And with their sister team, Red Bull, that partnership, I can't see them stepping further back down the grid. I think they'll maintain where they are, or hopefully progress. I can see them being potentially a top 4, top 5 team. And unfortunately this year, they've just slipped into that 6th position.
Yeah, they've clearly got a good formula going with their car design. Like you say, it seems likely that will continue. If they can just nail down their strategy, wring out some good performances out of Tsunoda in his second season, then they could be battling for 3rd or 4th place in the Constructors. And maybe even give their big brother Red Bull a run for their money. You never know. It'd be like when they first started, and the Toro Rosso was actually in some cases the stronger team and the stronger car. They might even go back to that period of time again. I think on the occasional race day it could happen, especially if Gasly is able to put it together. But then they'll also have Perez being more comfortable at Red Bull, which will presumably you'd think would result in more consistency on his side as well, because there were times where the two of them were actually in contention with one another. So maybe that'll continue to be the case. I think it could be really exciting to see AlphaTauri and Red Bull actually be competing with each other at times. I think that would be very entertaining, if nothing else.
It'd be great for the sport as well, having that partnership, but having that rivalry. Just a quick question before we round this off. 2022 is, obviously Yuki signed for 2022. He was a little bit surprised himself that he was given the opportunity. Is this his last year to prove himself? Because he's had a pretty terrible year this year, and if he does the same next year, is that his chances gone, do you think?
If he doesn't do a lot better next year, I'll be very surprised if he stays in that car, unless there's some other reason that they might want to keep hold of him. If he happens to particularly gel with the crew there. Obviously, there's a lot that we don't see that might make them want to keep hold of him. But on performances alone, I think if he has a repeat of 2021, I'll be astonished if they keep hold of him. Because as we've said lots of times, there's so much talent waiting to come into Formula One that you can kind of afford to be a bit brutal and say, well, you had your go. Here's all these great drivers that we could take instead. And just on Red Bull's driver program alone, they've got some quality. So, yeah, I think I'd be very surprised, and 2022 is going to be the year where he's got to step it up and show that the investment and resources behind him have been well placed. And Gasly, yeah, there's no question of the guy's quality. I think he might just stay there for a long time.
Yeah,
I think if the team can keep progressing, obviously he wants to be in a top team. I think I'd be very surprised if he went back to Red Bull in the long run. I think it wasn't just that they had problems with his performances, but I think he didn't quite gel with the team in general. Just his approach didn't seem to fit in nicely. So I think he might stay at AlphaTauri for a long time, and maybe sometime in the future we might see him go to another team. But I don't think it'll be for a few years yet. He seems to really be in his element at AlphaTauri.
absolutely. And I can't, looking at the top tier teams, you've got Mercedes, who are pretty much locked out. There is a slight question mark around Lewis Hamilton at the moment, but Mercedes pretty much locked out for the next couple of years. Red Bull locked out for the next couple of years. Ferrari seem pretty happy. McLaren have obviously brought Daniel Ricciardo in this year, and have got a multi-year contract of Lando Norris. So those top four teams, they're all pretty locked out for the foreseeable future. So if you're sitting in 5th or 6th place, they should have been 5th place this year without a doubt, comfortably as well. So if you're sat in that 5th place, why would you try and move to maybe a lower tier team just because you might have that opportunity? I would stick it out and work with the team. If you're comfortable, why would you move?
Yeah, I think that's about right. And maybe AlphaTauri will become one of those top teams in the following years.
It would be good to see, yeah. Well, that's it for AlphaTauri and the 2021 season. If you've got any thoughts or questions about 2021 or your predictions for 2022, please let us know at RacePerMinute on Twitter, or you can get in touch with us at RacePerMinute.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, by all means, you can drop us a comment. If you've enjoyed this episode, please give us a rating and a like. If you like what we do, please consider subscribing for more wherever you're getting Race Per Minute. And if you really want to support the show and help keep the quality content coming, you can do by donating as little as £1 a month at patreon.com/RacePerMinute. That was AlphaTauri. I believe the next team is Alpine, a new name to the year of Formula One. And we'll see you then.
See you then.